Hi, hello, and welcome back to my channel, dear viewers. Today, I'm continuing my playthrough in my Minecraft hardcore world and, of course, reading you some strange, dramatic, and interesting stories from across Reddit. I have big plans for this world, so I'm getting ready to head out on a journey to find the perfect spot. In the meantime, grab your favorite snacks, pour yourself a tasty drink, and get ready to immerse yourself in the world of Reddit stories. So, the first story is from the Am I the Arsehole subreddit, and it's titled, Am I the Arsehole for going through my dead grandmother's storage unit alone, even though my mum begged me not to? This happened over the last 3 weeks. My grandmother Ruth died last month at 81. Heart failure, not unexpected. She'd been declining for a year. I was close with her, closer than I was with my own mum, honestly, which is relevant later. After the funeral, my mum and I were cleaning out Grandma's apartment, and I found a small metal key taped to the bottom of her jewelry box, inside a torn piece of paper that just said, Unit 1114, Riverside. I showed my mum. She went white, like actually pale, sat down on the bed white. She said, Throw that away, there's nothing there, it's old junk from before I was born, don't waste your time. I want to be clear, my mum is not a dramatic person, she's an accountant, she irons dish towels, so this reaction was wildly out of character, and obviously that made me want to know more, not less. I asked her straight up, what's Riverside storage? And she said she didn't know, she was guessing, she just didn't want me digging through a dead woman's stuff like a garage sale. Which, okay, fine, except she was gripping the bed frame so hard her knuckles were white. I let it go for like 4 days. Then curiosity ate me alive, and I looked up storage facilities near Riverside Ave, in the town Grandma grew up in, 2 hours from where she lived the last 30 years. Found it. Called. Confirmed there was a Unit 114 registered under R. Kowalczyk. Grandma's maiden name, not her married name. Paid up automatically every year via an auto draft from an account I didn't even know still existed. I didn't tell my mum I was going. I told her I had a work trip. I drove out on a Saturday. The place was one of those old chain-link storage yards, half the units rusted shut. The manager, an older guy named Gary, needed my grandmother's death certificate and ID matching, next of kin, which I had because I was the one who handled her estate stuff. My mum couldn't deal with paperwork after the funeral, understandably. He walked me over, cut the old padlock since I didn't have a working key for that specific lock, and left me alone with a rolling metal door and my heart absolutely pounding, for no reason I could explain. Inside was smaller than I expected, no furniture. Just stacked boxes, a rolled-up rug, and an old steamer trunk shoved in the back corner. I want to say I felt spooked the second I stepped in, but really it just smelled like every other storage unit, dust and cardboard. I started with the boxes near the door. Mostly mundane stuff. Old dishware wrapped in newspaper from the 1980s, a moth-eaten coat, a shoebox of black and white photographs I didn't recognize, people I'd never seen, at what looked like a lake house. Then I got to the trunk. It was locked, but the key from the jewelry box fit. Inside were letters, dozens of them, bundled with disintegrating rubber bands, all addressed to Ruth at a P.O. box, no return address on most of them, though a few had a name, D. Reyes. I sat on the concrete floor of that storage unit and read for probably 2 hours straight. The letters were love letters, passionate, aching ones, spanning roughly 1968 to 1975, based on postmarks, from a man who was not my grandfather. The early ones were sweet, talking about meeting at the diner, sneaking out to see a film, but by 1971 they got heavier. He wrote about the baby like it was something already decided, something they were building a life around. Then in one letter, dated March 1972, he wrote, I understand why you have to do it this way. I'll never ask you to change your mind. Just know that somewhere she'll always be mine too, even if she never knows my name. I read that line probably 6 times sitting on that cold floor. My mother was born in June 1972. I want to be very careful here because I'm aware I might be assembling a story out of fragments. But the dates matched too perfectly, and there was a small manila envelope tucked in the trunk's side pocket, with my mother's actual birth certificate in it. A copy, not the original, except the father's name field was different than the one I've seen on the version my mum has framed in her house. This one said David Reyes. Hers says my grandfather's name, Walter Kowalczyk. There was also a photo, later than the others, black and white, of a baby. A note on the back just said R. She has his eyes, -D, in the same handwriting as the letters. I sat in that unit until Gary knocked on the door to tell me they closed at 6. I didn't touch anything else. I photographed the letters, the birth certificate, the photo, and I left everything else exactly where it was, and I drove home in silence, and then I did something I'm now second-guessing completely. I confronted my mum that same night. I showed up at her house at like 9 p.m, unannounced, and just laid the photos out on her kitchen table without a word first. I watched her face when she saw the handwriting on the letters. She didn't ask what they were. She just closed her eyes and said, "Where did you get these?" I told her everything, the unit, the key, the trunk. She sat down slowly, like her legs had actually stopped working, and said, "I need you to understand I only found out myself 12 years ago. Apparently, and I'm getting this second-hand from my very shaken mother at 9:30 p.m. over cold coffee. My grandmother told her the truth once, only once, after a stroke scare in her late 60s when she thought she might die and didn't want to die with the secret. My grandfather Walter, who my mum grew up believing was her biological father and who died in 1998, was not her biological dad. Ruth had had an affair with a man named David Reyes while Walter was overseas for work for almost a year. When Ruth found out she was pregnant, David wanted to leave his own wife and be with her, but Ruth panicked. She was scared of the scandal, scared of losing her marriage and her standing in a small town in the early 70s, and she told him no, and she never told Walter the truth, and she raised my mother as Walter's daughter, full stop, forever. David apparently kept writing for years, even after Ruth cut things off completely. My mum said Ruth told her David eventually stopped writing around 1975, and she never heard from him again and didn't know if he was even still alive. My mum made me swear I wouldn't tell anyone else in the family, not my aunt, Walter and Ruth's other daughter, who is biologically Walter's, not my grandmother's remaining siblings, nobody. She said, "This is not a story I want to be the center of. I've had 12 years to be at peace with it. Please don't make me relive it in front of the whole family." Here's where it gets messy and where I need Reddit's honest opinion, not just validation. I didn't leave it alone. About a week later, I looked up David Reyes from the return address on one older envelope, same small town, and found an obituary. He died in 2019, but he had children listed as survivors, meaning I potentially have half uncles or aunts, biological family my mother has never met, who have no idea my mum even exists. I mentioned this to my mum, just mentioned it, said I found his obituary, he had kids. She got so upset she actually started crying, said something like, "I did not ask you to build me a new family. At 51 years old, I have a family," and left the room. Now my aunt is asking me why I've seemed off and why my mum seems off, and I haven't told her anything, but I feel like I'm holding a grenade with the pin half out. Part of me thinks my mum deserves to know if she has half-siblings out there who might want to know her, even if it's messy. Part of me thinks I already went digging where I was explicitly asked not to, twice now, and I should just shut the trunk, metaphorically, and let my mother decide what she wants to do with information that is, at the end of the day, about her life and her biological father, not mine. Am I the asshole for going to that storage unit against my mum's wishes, and then for looking up David Reyes' family after she asked me to drop it? So, after reading this thread, honestly the top comment nailed it for me. OP wasn't wrong to go find the truth once it was already staring her in the face with a literal locked trunk and a birth certificate, but digging up a whole second family without asking first crossed a real line. Curiosity is one thing, deciding for someone else how much of their own past they're ready to handle is another. Anyway, next up is a story from r/uh-oh consequences that starts with a harmless white lie on a first date and ends somewhere I genuinely didn't see coming. Back in February, I matched with a girl, we'll call her Nadia, on a dating app. We were messaging back and forth, and she asked what I did for work. At the time, I was between jobs. I'd gotten laid off from an IT support role 2 months earlier, and was doing freelance stuff that paid basically nothing, and I was embarrassed about it. So instead of saying that, I told her I worked as a project manager for a mid-sized architecture firm downtown. I picked that because I actually used to do IT support for an architecture firm, so I knew enough real details to sound convincing. Floor plans, client names, I changed them slightly, software they used, office layout, all of it. It was supposed to be a one-time thing to get through the first date without feeling like a loser. I figured either the date would go nowhere and it wouldn't matter, or if it went well, I'd come clean eventually with some story about how I left that job for a better opportunity, easing the lie out gradually. The date went incredibly well, like suspiciously well. We talked for 4 hours at a bar that was supposed to close at 11, and the bartender had to basically ask us to leave. She was smart, funny, called me out on stuff in a way I found genuinely hot, instead of annoying. I liked her more than I'd liked anyone in years, so I didn't correct the lie. I told myself I'd do it next time. Then next time came, and it felt even harder because now there was more invested. And then there was a third date, and a fourth, and somewhere around date 6 we were official, and I still hadn't said anything, and now the lie wasn't just what I do for work. It was foundational to how she saw me. She'd tell her friends my boyfriend's a project manager. She'd ask about my day, and I'd have to invent meetings, invent a difficult client named Marcus, who didn't exist, invent a coworker named Denise, who I complained about after a rough week. I built an entire fictional professional life, brick by brick, because stopping felt more catastrophic than continuing. Meanwhile, my actual job situation improved. I picked up a decent freelance contract, doing back-end dev work for a logistics company, fully remote, paid well, way better than the fake architecture job, honestly. I could have used that as my cover story truthfully and stopped lying. But by then Nadia and her family had met me as works in architecture, and switching my supposed career 3 months in felt like it would raise way more questions than just continuing. Here's where it gets bad. Nadia's dad is a contractor. Small residential stuff, not commercial, but he knows people in the local building industry. At a family dinner in April, which I had successfully avoided for 2 months with excuses, her dad casually mentioned that his buddy does subcontracting work for Holbrook and Vance, the firm I claimed to work at. I panicked internally, but played it cool, said something vague like small world, and changed the subject fast. I thought I dodged it. 2 weeks later, Nadia calls me, sounding weird. Not mad, just confused. She says, "So my dad's friend, the one who does the electrical subcontracting? He asked around at Holbrook and Vance about you, just to say hi since we're together, and nobody there has heard of you." I felt my stomach drop through the floor of my apartment. I tried the worst possible move first, which was doubling down. I said maybe he asked the wrong department. It's a big firm, not everyone knows everyone. She said okay, seemed to accept it, but I could tell something had shifted. Then, and this is the part that makes me want to disappear into the ground, her dad, trying to be helpful, not malicious at all. This is the worst part. He was trying to do something nice, called the HR department at Holbrook and Vance directly to ask if they had any openings, mentioning that his daughter's boyfriend worked there and loved it, thought maybe there was room for his subcontractor buddy too. HR told him they had no record of anyone by my name ever being employed there. Not currently, not in the past 3 years, nothing. He told Nadia immediately, obviously assuming there'd been some clerical error or that I'd been let go and hadn't mentioned it. She called me that night, and instead of asking me directly, she just said, "Can you come over? We need to talk." I sat in my car outside her apartment for 20 minutes before I went up, because I knew this was it. I had 2 options, keep lying, which was clearly no longer sustainable, or tell her everything. 3 months of accumulated fiction, all at once, face to face. I told her everything. The layoff, the freelance work, the embarrassment, the snowball effect, all of it. I did not try to spin it as a small thing. I told her I understood if she never wanted to see me again, and that the worst part wasn't even the job. It was that I let a small lie about status turn into 3 months of lying to someone I actually loved, about basically my entire daily existence. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said something that stuck with me since. "I don't actually care that you were unemployed. I would have dated you anyway. What I care about is that you decided I was someone you needed to perform for, instead of someone you could just be honest with." She asked me to leave. She said she needed time to think about whether she could trust anything I'd told her, past or future. It's been 11 days. She's responded to maybe 3 texts, short ones, nothing warm. Her dad, understandably, thinks I'm either a con artist or unstable, and I don't blame him. I'm not writing this looking for a way to spin more lies or manipulate my way back in. I genuinely don't know if there's a version of this where she forgives me or if she should. I just keep thinking about how none of this needed to happen. I could have just told her I was freelancing on our first date, and probably nothing about how she felt about me would have changed. I built an entire collapse out of 1 moment of insecurity, and now I'm just waiting to find out if 3 months of good, real feelings can survive finding out the scaffolding under them was fake. What got me about this one, after digging through the comments, is how many people admitted they'd told a similar small lie early in dating and just never found the exit ramp. It's apparently way more common than I assumed, this compounding lie spiral. The top comment basically said, trust doesn't break from the lie itself, it breaks from realizing the person chose comfort over honesty for months. Which feels brutally accurate. Alright, from a fake job to a much darker kind of secret. Next up is a story from r/true off my chest about a woman who discovered her husband had been hiding something in their attic for 6 years. I need to get this out somewhere because I haven't told a single person in my life what I found, not even my sister, and I've been sitting with it alone for 4 days now. My husband Marcus and I bought our house 6 years ago. It's an older place, built in the 60s, with a finished attic that we use for storage. There's a small room up there, more like a large closet really, maybe 8 by 10, that Marcus put a padlock on within the first month of us moving in. When I asked about it, he said it was where he kept old work files and some of his late father's things that were too painful to sort through yet, and he asked me to just let it be his space. I respected that. Grief is grief. Everyone processes differently, and Marcus's dad died right before we bought the house, so the timing made sense. I let it go for the first year, then the second year. By year 3 I brought it up again, gently, said maybe it would help to go through things together, and he got oddly sharp with me, I said I'd handle it, please stop bringing it up, in a tone he never uses with me. I dropped it, and honestly didn't bring it up again for a long time, because it felt like it wasn't worth the fight. Over the years I noticed small things. He goes up there sometimes late at night, maybe once every couple months, always alone, always for 20-30 minutes, and comes down looking tired or subdued. I used to think he was just having a moment with his dad's memory. I stopped questioning it because questioning it caused tension, and our marriage otherwise has been genuinely good. We don't fight, we're affectionate, we built a life we both seem happy in. This was just the one closed door, literally and figuratively, and I chose peace over pressing it. 4 days ago Marcus left for a work trip to Denver, 3 days, and in his rush to catch an early flight, he left his keyring on the kitchen counter. The one with his car key, his office key, and a small brass key I'd never seen him use anywhere except that attic room. I stood in the kitchen holding that keyring for probably 10 minutes having an actual argument with myself. 6 years of respecting a boundary versus 6 years of a locked door in my own home that I'd never once been allowed to see inside. I want to be honest that curiosity won pretty fast. I told myself I'd just look, not touch anything, just finally see what was in there so my brain could stop quietly chewing on it. I went up to the attic and unlocked the door. It wasn't what I expected at all. There were no boxes of his dad's belongings, no work files. The room had been set up almost like a small shrine, but not the way you'd imagine a grief shrine to be. There was a twin mattress on the floor, made up neatly with a child's bedspread, faded, clearly old, patterned with cartoon dinosaurs. There was a small dresser with folded children's clothes inside, sizes for maybe a 4 or 5-year-old. There was a shelf with toys, a stuffed rabbit missing an eye, a few picture books. And on the wall, taped up, dozens of photographs of a little boy I had never seen in my life, at various ages from infancy to maybe 5 years old. In some photos Marcus was holding him. In every single one, Marcus looked younger than I've ever seen him look, and happier. In a way I realized with a sick feeling I had genuinely never seen on his face in the 6 years I've known him. I found a small memory box on the dresser. Inside were hospital bracelets, a lock of hair in a tiny envelope, and a folded death certificate. The boy's name was Eli. He died at age 5, 9 years ago, 4 years before Marcus and I even met. Cause of death listed as a drowning accident. I sat on that little mattress and cried for probably 30 minutes before I could even process what I was looking at. Marcus had a son, a whole child, a whole life, an entire chapter of grief so massive he built a literal shrine to it and never once told me it existed. We've been together 7 years, married for 5, and I never knew he'd been married before, never knew he had a child, never knew any of this, because as far as I understood his life before me, he'd never been married and had no kids, which is something we discussed explicitly early in our relationship when we talked about wanting kids of our own eventually. I don't know if he lied to me outright at some point, or if he just let me assume based on things he never corrected. I genuinely can't remember if he ever said the actual words "I've never been married," or if I just believed that because it's what made sense given everything else he told me about his past. I put everything back exactly as I found it. I locked the door. I have not said a single word to him since he's been on his trip, and he comes home tomorrow, and I genuinely do not know how to have this conversation. Part of me is devastated for him in a way that makes my chest hurt. Losing a child, a 5-year-old, in a drowning accident is a horror I can't fully wrap my mind around, and I understand now why he flinches every time we've talked about having kids eventually, and always finds a reason to push the timeline back. Part of me is also reeling from the fact that I've been married for 5 years to a man whose most defining tragedy I knew nothing about, who built and maintained an entire secret room in our shared home for 6 straight years, and who let me believe a version of his life that wasn't true. I don't know if I confront him the second he walks in the door, or if I wait for him to ever tell me himself, which at this rate could be never. I don't know if this is a story about a man drowning in grief he never processed, or a story about a marriage built on a foundation I didn't know was cracked. I think it might be both. Alright, reading this one genuinely wrecked me a little. After sitting with it, I think what got me most is how the story refuses to be simple. It's not really about betrayal or deceit in the usual cheating secret sense. It's about how grief can make people build entire hidden rooms, literal and emotional, and how protecting someone from your pain can end up looking identical to lying to them. No easy villain here. Next up, something lighter in tone but just as strange, a story from aita about a woman who found out her roommate had been living a double life right under her nose, in the most mundane way possible. Am I the asshole for reading my roommate's mail after finding a package addressed to a name I've never heard her use? This started so small, I almost didn't think it was worth posting about. But it has spiraled into something I genuinely don't know how to handle, so here we are. I've lived with my roommate Priya for a 1.5 years. We found each other through a mutual friend, split rent evenly, get along fine, not best friends, but easy, low-drama cohabitation. She works some kind of remote marketing job, keeps to herself mostly, normal stuff. About 3 weeks ago, a package showed up on our porch, addressed to Sarah Whitfield, at our address. I figured it was a mix-up, maybe the previous tenant, and left it by the door. Priya picked it up when she got home, and I didn't think anything of it until I noticed her carry it straight to her room without opening it in the kitchen, like she normally does with her Amazon stuff. A week later, another one. Different name this time. S. Whit. Same handwriting style on a return address label, some skincare company. I made an offhand joke, something like, "Hey, your secret identities packages are piling up," fully expecting her to laugh and explain it was for a friend or an old sublet situation. She went stiff. Just for a second, but I saw it. Then she laughed it off and said, "Oh, that's just my sister. She has stuff shipped here sometimes since her building has package theft issues." Fine. Reasonable. I let it go. Except Priya doesn't have a sister. In a 1.5 years of living together, multiple family conversations, holidays where she went home, I would remember if she had a sister, and I'm almost positive she's told me she's an only child at least twice. Once, specifically when I was complaining about my sister, and she said something like, "Must be nice, I always wanted a sibling." I didn't confront her. I know how that sounds already, like I was gearing up to snoop, and I guess I was, because about 4 days after that a third package came, this one from a bank, addressed to Sarah Whitfield again, and it just felt heavier than junk mail, official looking. I did not open it. I want that on record. I just held it up to the light in a very stupid, very nosy way, and could make out through the envelope window that it looked like a card, like maybe a debit or credit card. I put it back exactly where it was. But that night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. And while Priya was in the shower, I looked through our recycling bin, which we share, technically, since it's one bin for the apartment. I found a torn-up piece of paper, partially shredded but not fully, that looked like part of a lease agreement. The visible part had a partial address, not ours, and the name Sarah Whitfield next to a signature that, when I compared it mentally to Priya's handwriting on our own lease, looked identical. AITA for digging through shared recycling and quietly noting what I found without saying anything to her yet. I haven't confronted her. I don't know what I even would say. Is this something serious I should be worried about, or is there some boring explanation I'm missing, and I'm about to blow up my living situation over nothing? Update 1, 3 days later. Okay, so this got a lot bigger, a lot fast, and I need to update because several of you in the comments guessed something close to what's actually happening, which is unsettling. After my last post, I decided to just watch and wait instead of confronting her, mostly because several commenters pointed out that if something shady was going on, tipping her off might make her cover tracks or just move out abruptly, and I wanted to understand what I was actually dealing with first. 2 days ago, Priya left for what she said was a work conference, 3 days away, which was itself unusual because she's never travelled for work in the entire time I've known her. Her job has always seemed fully remote with zero travel. She left in a hurry, forgot her phone charger, and I noticed she took a suitcase that seemed way too big for a conference. I'm not proud of what I did next, but I want to be transparent since I'm asking for judgment here. Her door doesn't lock. We never bothered installing locks on interior doors when we moved in, it just never came up. I went into her room. I found a small lockbox in her closet, unlocked, honestly probably because she trusted me not to look. Inside were 4 different IDs. Not fake-looking novelty IDs, actual state IDs, all with her face but different names. Priya Sharma, the name I know her by, Sarah Whitfield, a Priya Shaw, and one more, Anita Whitfield. Different addresses on each one, different birth dates even. She'd shaved 4 years off her age on one of them. There were also several credit cards under these different names, a couple of pay stubs from jobs I've never heard her mention. And, this is the part that made my stomach drop, a folder with printed screenshots of Facebook and Instagram messages between Sarah Whitfield and multiple different men, clearly romantic in nature, spanning what looked like months, with at least 3 different guys who all seemed to believe they were her only boyfriend. I did not go through everything. I got scared and put it all back as close to how I found it as I could and left the room. I don't think this is fraud in the sense of scamming random strangers out of money necessarily, though I genuinely don't know that for sure. But it looks a lot like Priya has been running multiple entire identities, possibly juggling multiple relationships under different names, and possibly has financial accounts under fake or altered identities, which, even if it's just about avoiding an ex or hiding from family, still involves what looks like actual identity documents that shouldn't exist. I have not said anything to her. She's due back tomorrow. I don't know if I'm rooming with someone doing something genuinely illegal, or someone with a wild personal life who's been lying to multiple men, or something else entirely that I'm not understanding. Do I confront her? Do I quietly start looking for a new place and get out without saying why? Or do I need to consider whether I should tell someone official about this? Update 2. 1 week later. This has taken a turn I did not see coming at all, and I need to lay it out, because it's honestly reframed everything. I decided, based on a lot of advice here and from a friend I finally told in person, to just talk to her directly instead of investigating further or leaving without explanation. I felt like I at least deserved an honest conversation, given we've lived together this long, and honestly some of you were right that going to the police with half-formed suspicions and someone else's ID photos I found by snooping could open Emmy up to problems too. When she got back from her conference, I just sat her down and told her straight up what I'd found, the packages, the lease scrap, and yes, eventually, the lockbox, which I admitted I'd gone through. I expected anger, defensiveness, maybe her moving out immediately in a rage. Instead, she started crying almost right away, and what came out over the next 2 hours was honestly so much sadder and stranger than I expected. Priya, that is actually her legal first name, that part's real, has been dealing with an abusive ex-husband for the last 6 years. Not an ex-boyfriend, an actual ex-husband, something else she never mentioned to me in a 1.5 years. He tracked her for years after she left him, showed up at 2 previous apartments, got into her accounts, harassed her employers. A domestic violence advocate apparently helped her build Sarah Whitfield as essentially a decoy identity years ago. Real documents obtained legally through some kind of address confidentiality program some states offer for DV survivors, though I genuinely don't know how the finer legal details of that work, and neither, it seems, does she fully, because she'd taken it further than intended. The multiple men, the dating under different names. She said that started almost accidentally, using the decoy identity to date safely without her ex being able to find her through mutual connections, since he'd shown up at a previous boyfriend's job before. But she admitted it spiraled. She'd gotten comfortable juggling different versions of herself with different men because it let her avoid real intimacy or vulnerability, something her therapist apparently has been trying to get her to unpack for over a year. She said Anita Whitfield wasn't even about the ex at all. That one was actually a version of herself she built to apply for jobs after a previous employer, connected socially to her ex's family, blacklisted her informally from an entire industry. I sat there not really knowing what to say. Some of what she described sounded like a genuinely traumatized person surviving the only way she knew how. Some of it sounded like a person who'd lost track of which version of herself was real and had been lying to multiple men about who she even was. Which isn't something abuse excuses fully, in my opinion, even if it explains where it came from. She apologized for never telling me any of it, said she'd wanted to for a long time, but the longer she waited, the harder it got. Which, yeah, I actually understood that part more than I expected to. She moved out 2 days ago, not because I asked her to, but because she said living somewhere her real name was known to a roommate who'd seen the whole structure felt too exposed, and she wanted a cleaner break to actually consolidate into one identity like her therapist has been pushing her toward. We hugged before she left, which surprised me. She's not a bad person, I don't think. I just think she'd been running so long she forgot how to stop. I still don't fully know how to feel. Relieved the apartment isn't connected to anything criminal in the way I feared. Sad for her. A little unsettled that I lived beside someone that fractured without ever noticing. I have a new roommate moving in next month, someone from work, extremely boring in the best possible way. And honestly, after all this, boring sounds incredible. Well, honestly, going through this whole saga, start to finish, left me way more sympathetic than I expected going in. I think what makes this one stick with me is that it's not really a mystery thriller with a villain at the end. It's a portrait of what long-term survival mode does to a person's sense of self, which is a lot heavier than the aita for snooping framing suggests at first. Alright, switching gears completely. Next up is a shorter, sharper story from r/uh-oh consequences about a guy who borrowed his co-worker's parking spot for 1 week and how that tiny decision somehow got him fired. I worked as a mid-level analyst at a logistics company. Decent job, 3 years in, generally well-liked, no prior issues on my record. Our office has an assigned parking lot, but honestly enforcement was always loose. People parked wherever, nobody really cared, except for one specific row closest to the building that was reserved for senior management, and a few grandfathered, long-time employees who'd negotiated spots into their contracts years ago. My actual assigned spot, way in the back lot, got torn up for repaving. The whole back lot did, actually. A 2-week construction project the building announced with about 4 days' notice. Email went out saying employees in the back lot should use overflow parking or available spaces at their discretion during the work. I noticed one spot in that front reserved row that had been visibly empty for like 3 months straight. No car, ever, not once, in 3 months of me walking past it daily. I asked around casually, and someone mentioned it used to belong to a guy named Foster, who'd transferred to the Denver office back in the spring, and apparently nobody had reassigned the spot yet. It just sat there empty because of some administrative gap. So for the first week of construction, I started parking there. It was closer, it was clearly unused, and the email said use available spaces at their discretion. Nobody said anything, not one person. I didn't think twice about it. Second week, still construction, still parking there, still nothing said, until Thursday of week 2, when I came out to find a very polite but very clearly annoyed note under my windshield wiper that said, "This is Diane's spot, please move your vehicle." No further explanation. I had never heard of a Diane in relation to that spot. I asked around and found out Diane was a director in a department I didn't interact with much, and apparently the empty spot hadn't been reassigned to her yet on paper, but informally, verbally, in some meeting I wasn't in, it had been earmarked for her for when she returned from an extended medical leave, which was happening the following Monday. I felt bad, genuinely, and I moved my car back to overflow parking that same day. No argument, no pushback. Figured that was the end of it. It was not the end of it. Diane, it turned out, was extremely particular and apparently already primed to be in a bad mood about her return to work after months of medical leave. I later heard through the grapevine it was something serious, cancer treatment, which honestly made me feel even worse about the whole thing in retrospect. She came back Monday, saw the note had worked, but apparently mentioned to her assistant that someone had been parking in her spot without permission for 2 weeks, which somehow, through office telephone game, became someone parked in Diane's spot the entire time she was undergoing treatment, seemingly on purpose. I want to be clear that is not remotely what happened, but that is the version that started circulating. My manager pulled me aside Wednesday of that week to ask about it, clearly having heard some version of the story. I explained the whole thing honestly. The construction, the empty spot for 3 months, the use your discretion email, moving immediately once I got the note. He said he understood, said it sounded like a misunderstanding, and that should have been that. Except apparently Diane, either through genuine misunderstanding or because she was looking for somewhere to direct frustration during an incredibly hard time in her life, brought it up again in a leadership meeting the following week as an example of entitled junior staff behavior, without naming me specifically, but enough people knew it was me that it got back around fast. This is where it gets messy in a way I still don't fully understand the internal politics of. My manager's boss, apparently trying to smooth things over with Diane's department because of some unrelated ongoing tension between the two departments over budget allocation, decided to make an example that leadership was taking accountability seriously. I got called into a meeting with HR present, which had never happened to me before in 3 years, and was told there'd been multiple complaints about parking policy violations, plural, complaints, which I don't believe was true. I think it was one complaint retold multiple times to different people, functionally inflating itself into multiple. I was given a written warning. I signed it, mostly just wanting the whole thing over with, even though it felt disproportionate for a 2-week parking situation involving an empty spot and an email literally telling us to use our discretion. I thought that was finally the end of it. About 5 weeks later, completely unrelated on paper, there was a round of layoffs. The company had a rough quarter, this happens sometimes, normal business stuff. I was on the list. My manager, off the record, over drinks after my last day, told me something I probably wasn't supposed to hear. When the layoff list was being finalized, my name came up as borderline between 2 people with similar roles, and someone in the room, he wouldn't say who, but the timing made it obvious enough, mentioned the written warning as a tiebreaker. Said something like, he's already shown a pattern of not respecting workplace boundaries, using one written warning about a parking spot from an empty space I'd used for 2 weeks during a construction project with explicit permission via email as evidence of a pattern. I lost a job I was good at, that I'd been at for 3 years, with 0 prior issues, over a parking spot that sat empty for 3 months, an email telling me to use available space at my discretion, and a chain of office gossip that transformed a 2-week misunderstanding into a permanent mark that got used against me the one time it mattered most. I'm employed again now, better job actually, better pay, so this has kind of a fine ending for me personally. But I still think about how insane it is that the actual sequence of events was. Construction happened, I parked in a spot, someone told me to move, I moved. That's it. That's the entire incident. And somehow it followed me all the way to a layoff 5 weeks later because of how many hands the story passed through before it reached the room where decisions actually got made. Alright, so next up, a much more personal one, a story from r/true off my chest about a woman who realized, at her own wedding, that she'd been in love with someone else the entire time. I got married in April, to a genuinely good man named Theo. We'd been together 4 years, engaged for 1, and everything about our relationship on paper was right. He's kind, stable, funny in a low-key way, wants kids eventually like I do, gets along great with my family. My mum cried actual tears of joy when we got engaged. Everyone told me how lucky I was, and I believed them. I really did believe I was lucky, right up until about 6:40 p.m. on my wedding day. My best friend since college, Callum, was my best man. My parents thought it was a little unconventional to have a guy fill that role instead of a maid of honor, but Callum and I have been inseparable since freshman year, and Theo genuinely liked him too. They'd get drinks together sometimes without me even there. There was never anything romantic between Callum and me, or at least that's what I told myself and everyone else for 15 years. We dated other people the entire time we knew each other. He's had 2 serious long-term girlfriends in the years I've known him. I never once let myself think about him that way. Not seriously, not for longer than the length of an intrusive thought I'd immediately shove down. At the reception, after dinner, it came time for speeches. My sister went first, sweet, a little too long, made everyone cry about our late dad. Then Theo's brother did the standard best man adjacent roast, some embarrassing college stories. Everyone laughed. Then Callum stood up. He started off funny, the way he does everything, made a joke about how he never thought he'd be giving a wedding speech for someone he met throwing up in a dorm bathroom during a party freshman year. Big laugh from the room. Then he shifted, got quieter, and started talking about the day we met properly. Not the party, but the actual first real conversation we had, 3 days later, in the campus library at 2 a.m., both of us pulling all-nighters for exams we hadn't studied for. He said, and I'm going to try to get this close to word for word because it's carved into me now. I've known this woman for 15 years. I've watched her get her heart broken twice, watched her get her master's degree, watched her move across the country and back. I've been at every single major moment of her adult life, whether I was technically invited or not, and somehow, through all of it, she's remained the person whose opinion I care about more than almost anyone's on earth. Theo, I need you to know what you're getting. You're getting someone who loves fiercely and shows up completely, and honestly, man, you're a lucky guy, because I've been trying to figure out for 15 years how to deserve that kind of friendship, and I still don't think I fully have. The room found it sweet. People were dabbing their eyes. Someone said, "Ah," audibly. Theo actually stood up and hugged him after. Big, genuine laugh. No weirdness on his end at all. He took it exactly as intended. A moving speech from his wife's best friend. But I was sitting there in my wedding dress, my new husband's hand in mine, watching Callum sit back down, and I felt something crack open in my chest that I have no other way to describe except like a locked door finally giving way after years of me leaning my whole body weight against it from the other side. I wasn't sad exactly. I wasn't panicking, not in that moment. It was more like absolute, total clarity, the kind that arrives without asking permission. I looked at my husband of 4 hours and thought, with a calm that terrified me more than any panic could have, I chose the safe, correct, sensible version of a life. And I looked at Callum, laughing at something his girlfriend Priya said to him, and thought, that's the person I actually wanted, and I've known it for a very long time, and I buried it so deep and for so long that I convinced myself it was already dead. I want to be extremely honest here. Nothing has ever happened between Callum and me. No kiss, no drunken almost moment, nothing physical or explicit ever, not once in 15 years. This isn't a story about an affair, or even an emotional affair in any active sense. This is a story about me realizing, 3 hours into my marriage, that I had built my entire adult romantic life, partly in avoidance of a feeling I never let myself examine directly, because examining it would have meant blowing up a 15-year friendship that mattered more to me than almost anything, and because Callum, as far as I have ever been able to tell, has never once seen me that way. He's had girlfriends the whole time I've known him. He's currently been with Priya for 2 years. They're talking about moving in together. He gave that speech as a friend, full stop, with zero subtext. I'm almost completely certain of that, which somehow makes it worse, because it means this whole earthquake happened entirely inside me, on my own wedding day, and I have to just carry it, silently, forever, apparently. Because there is no version of this where saying it out loud does anything except destroy multiple relationships for a feeling that might not even be reciprocated, and might not even be real in the sense of being actionable. It might just be some psychological trick, some fear of commitment thing rearing up at the worst symbolic moment. Wedding day cold feet dressed up as profound realization. I've turned that possibility over in my head at least 100 times, trying to talk myself down. The wedding night was strange. Theo, thank God, had no idea anything was wrong. He was happy, a little drunk, kept saying how perfect the day was. I smiled and agreed, and had what I can only describe as an out-of-body experience getting ready for bed in a hotel room with my brand new husband, while internally replaying a speech from my best friend on loop. It's been 6 weeks. Theo and I are fine, on the surface completely fine. We're looking at honeymoon photos and planning a trip to see his parents next month, and everything is normal. I have not told him anything. I don't know if I ever will, and I genuinely go back and forth on whether telling him would be an act of honesty he deserves, or an act of cruelty that would hand him a wound for a feeling I might never act on, and that might fade with time, the way infatuations sometimes do when you actually examine them in daylight instead of at 2 a.m. in a wedding dress. I've also pulled back slightly from Callum, not enough that he's noticed, I don't think, a few unanswered texts that took me a day instead of an hour, skipping one of our standing monthly dinners with a vague excuse about being busy with wedding thank you cards. I don't know if I'm protecting myself or protecting him, or just being a coward, possibly all three at once. The thing that keeps me up at night isn't even really do I love him. I think some part of me has known the shape of that feeling for years and just refused to look directly at it. The thing that keeps me up is the timing. Why did it take his speech, at my own wedding, to finally make me look? Why couldn't I have had this reckoning 2 years ago, 1 year ago, literally any time before I stood in front of everyone I love and promised the rest of my life to someone else? Did some part of me choose the timing specifically because it was already too late to act on it, because a part of me needed it to be impossible so I'd never actually have to risk the friendship or risk finding out he doesn't feel the same? I love Theo. I want to be clear that this isn't a story where I'm secretly miserable in my marriage. He's a wonderful partner, and I chose him for real reasons, not just as a hiding place. But I don't think I can honestly say anymore that marrying him meant closing every door, and that's a truth I'm going to have to live with in total silence, probably for the rest of my life, because I don't see a single version of unburying it that doesn't hurt someone, possibly everyone, including me. I don't really know what I want from posting this. I'm not asking whether I should leave my husband over a feeling that might just be wedding day static. I think I just needed to write it down somewhere real, outside my own head, even anonymously, even to strangers, because I've been carrying it entirely alone for 6 weeks, and it's starting to feel unbearably heavy. Well, friends, that's all the stories I've found for today. I sincerely hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, I'd appreciate a like from each of you, and don't forget to leave a comment sharing your thoughts on these stories. For now, I'll say goodbye. See you next time in future videos.